For me, it's freedom, being able to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. It's something that I've always thought about. And now I kind of am that person that can wander around and do what I want to do. And it feels incredible.
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mastroianni. Today I have with me John Geldert. John is the founder and managing member of GMG Investment Properties. Prior to going full-time in real estate investing, he was involved in the construction industry for over 22 years. He started buying single-family homes in 2003 and is now focused on value-add multifamily. John currently owns 85 doors and is a limited partner in another 460 units. He's been successful in executing over $15 million in real estate transactions in his personal portfolio. John's passion for real estate has existed since he was a young boy. His perseverance and dedication to succeed, along with always providing excellent service to the community, has made him a successful business owner. Along with being a real estate investor, he is the proud father of two girls and owner-operator of GMG Inspections, a licensed home inspection company established in 2013. Wow, John, so great to have you on. How are you today?
I'm excited to be here, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excellent. So I remember you and I had a phone conversation. I think we first met a little over a year ago. And I remember you telling me the process of how you started off in construction, in the construction industry. You were working in and around the New York area, feeling a little bit burnt out by the work and the hustle. Well, now I don't want to say the hustle, but getting in and out of the city and the construction and looking for a better way. So maybe you could tell a little bit about your story and what you did to get yourself to become a full-time real estate investor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a union carpenter, started out when I was 19 years old, enjoyed working with my hands, enjoyed taking pride in my work, but very quickly realized that seeing a guy that was 45 years old, how their body was reacting to working in the job for so long, how they were having bad backs or bad knees, and it just, they weren't enjoying the job, but they were stuck in that position. And I remember realizing, like, I don't want to feel that way in 20 years from now, So I said, all right, this is a stepping stone. I'm going to learn as much as I can about this business and see where I end up. But I knew I didn't want to be a union carpenter my entire life. So fast forward, at the age of 24 years old, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, kind of changed my mindset about, making money work harder than you do, and different ways of doing that, right? So my whole mindset changed on, trading your time for money and so on. So went out and bought my first property in Pennsylvania. I was living in Queens at the time in my parents' basement, working for the city, got a house out in the Poconos. Great, I was on my way. Bought another house the next year, bought another house the next year. And I thought I had it figured out, I'd never taken a class in real estate, knew how to swing a hammer, knew how to renovate a house, but didn't know how to make it into a business. And I was exposed in, 2007, 2008 when the market came around and crashed. And I was kind of left paying all these mortgages and insurance and taxes on my own while tenants were coming in and leaving and not paying rent. And I had no systems in place, nothing. So I said, I can't make money doing this. I'll stick to the grind and keep on working in the union. And that lasted for a few more years. And 2015 got, to your point earlier, I was like, there's got to be a better way. I got to get back to real estate and I have to make it a business this time. So I started going out and networking, something that I'd never even heard of, something that as a carpenter, you don't do that. You go out and have a few drinks with the guys, but you don't go out and network and talk about business and goals and all that. So I went out, met a guy that was doing a syndication deal in Covington, Kentucky, became an LP on one of his deals, and I enjoyed it. I learned a ton while I was an LP on his deal, but one thing was missing. I didn't have any control. So I said, all right, I want to take the product they're doing there and bring it to Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, where I had a few properties now. I had a small mom and pop property manager looking over my properties for me. And I started buying duplexes and triplexes and executing a BRRRR strategy. And, I got a little bit lucky with the market and bought right and was able to oversee and sometimes put some sweat equity into these deals. And, so the cash out refis really helped me excel my business. Did some more networking, took on a business partner in some of my deals, and he helped me raise some capital. And, fast forward a little bit further, I realized that this duplex thing isn't going to really work out. I'm going to need a ton of doors. And I was coming up to my timeline of wanting to retire. I wanted to be out by the age of 40. So I started looking at bigger deals, and I found a 20 unit in Tobyhanna, Pennsylvania, which is a little bit north of where my portfolio was, and took that down. And that was a heavy, heavy value add. And once I took that down, I met the passive income that I needed to replace my W-2 income. And I was able to get out in July of 2019. And the reason I had a date was because I was a civil servant employee. So I was vested after 10 years. So I met the guideline of getting medical benefits and getting my pension in place. So that was basically my timeline. And I reverse engineered how many doors I needed and how much cash flow I needed to get to that point. And once I hit it, I had this second chapter of my life. And, that's where I'm at right now.
Wow. So many great things to unfold there. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think your story to some extent, at least in the beginning, is similar to mine, where, you buy a couple properties, you buy a couple smaller properties, probably did a bunch of the renovation yourself, found a small mom and pop, property management company to help you out. And then you spoke about, when you decided to get back into real estate after you kind of came out of it for a little bit, you became an LP on a deal. And I just wanted to see if you can kind of dive a little bit deeper into the differences. So for those who are listening who don't understand, an LP is a limited partner. And in many cases, the limited partner is a source of capital for the deal. And normally the general partners are the source of sort of, as you mentioned, control, but also a lot of the responsibilities fall on the general partners, right? So tell me about how that felt different from you, because you were really the single operator on your own in some of those smaller properties.
Yeah, so it was new to me. I never heard of a syndication, first of all, right? So once they broke it down for me and I understood the asset class, I understood the market. And then it was just, making that investment, right? So I had to liquidate some of my 401 to put into this thing. So it was really building that trust with the sponsor. And the sponsor is the GP, he runs the deal. And, it was reading through or browsing through a PPM, private placement memorandum. If anyone's seen it and they want to read it, then God bless them. But I skimmed through it, I may or may not have had my brother-in-law, who's an attorney, look through it quickly. But I was confident in the sponsor. And the way I became confident, Bob, is I listened to all his podcast interviews. So I knew him. Okay. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to do my due diligence on him. I'm going to look up on social media, Google him. And I listened to every single one of his podcasts to make sure that his story was consistent, right? And that's really what I was looking for, was consistency. And once I found that, I was like, all right, I'm ready to move forward with this. Once I'm in the deal, it was interesting the way he structured it, because it was a smaller deal. It was only 17 units. And it was called Earn While You Learn. Right. So they really opened up the curtains for me and showed me the before after, the before pictures, the after pictures, what type of renovations they were doing, what the rent bumps were going to look like, what the challenges were in the market. I got to underwrite some of the market as well. So I really had full exposure to what they were looking at in real time, which gave me a ton of, real life experience right there. So it's not sometimes what you're on some of these larger deals as a limited partner, you may not get that same type of opportunity depending on the sponsor, depending on the GP team. I was lucky enough to get it. And yeah, but it became kind of boring to me. Like, all right, this was not, and again, different syndications are structured different ways where they can do cash flow day one, monthly distributions, quarterly distributions. This specific one was annual distributions, and then the big payday was going to be once they refinanced it or sold the property. So there wasn't much going on. I didn't feel very involved. I didn't feel like a real estate investor. I felt like just an investor in some deal. And yeah, I've lightened up on some of my control, but in the beginning I was like, I want to be involved in this deal. I want to be the decision maker on what type of flooring we're doing or what type of rent increases we're going to be putting into place, or what the tenants are going to be, who we're going to place in there for tenancy. And I didn't have any of that. So yeah, that's ultimately why I said, all right, this is fun, but I want to take it in my own market and see if it works there as well.
So when you transitioned over and then you decided to start buying some larger multifamily properties, did some capital raising, were those opportunities syndicated, or was that were they JV opportunities?
Yeah, so all of them, besides the partnership that I have with one other investor, everything was in my own portfolio. To date, I haven't done any syndications.
Okay.
As a GP. We've underwritten a bunch of deals recently. Nothing is penciled out, but to date, any deals that I've done have all been of the JV variety or just taking it down myself.
Okay. So when you were in that limited partnership opportunity, you were LP in that syndication. What sort of things did you learn there that you were able to bring back to your own deals?
It was really one thing I realized was the property management, right? So we had a very, very difficult time with the property management that we hired because the majority of the GP team was local on Long Island, and this deal was in Covington, Kentucky. So we put a lot of responsibility, a lot of trust into the property manager, and things did not go smoothly. I mean, it was a heavy lift, one, and two, it just, just like other contractors, they go around chasing deposits, and the job didn't get done in a timely fashion. I think we did get ripped off for about $60,000 from one contractor for a window job they were supposed to do for us. So I did learn that. I learned that you can trust but verify, right?
Yeah.
Trust the people you're working with, but verify. And the only real way you can verify when you're out of market is to have boots on the ground. Like having somebody check up on these contractors, or having somebody check up on the terms of these units. That was a number one thing I learned. Also, what I learned how to cold call. I learned how to speak to other investors in that market. I learned how to underwrite the market itself. So those are the main takeaways I had from being an LP in that deal.
Okay. Wow. That's great. Well, I mean, they refer to the deal as earn and learn, right? So seems like you had a lot of good takeaways from it, and hopefully you also earned while you were in that deal too.
We missed our target date, but we got our returns. Yes, so we held it a little longer than we would have liked to, but we did get our returns, which is always. I'd much rather hold it a little longer in order to make those preferred returns as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So where you are now, are you, I mean, you mentioned that you're doing some underwriting, you're looking for opportunities. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you're seeing. I could tell you that I personally, I'm also underwriting, looking for opportunities, and there's clearly been a significant shift in the market. And I feel like what I'm seeing is that we're hoping sellers start to see it.
So to that point, there is a lag, right, between what the banks are doing and what the banks are seeing and what the sellers are seeing. So for instance, we did have an accepted LOI on a 24 unit down in Pace, Florida. We were through inspections, we had debt lined up, but after the inspections were done, we noticed that the place was in much greater need of repair than what the initial seller represented. So we were able to create a retrade, which is basically going back to the seller and saying, hey, listen, you told us that I think 18 units were fully renovated and turned when it was really only 14 units. So we were able to successfully negotiate, I think it was a $60,000 reduction in price. But we needed a larger CapEx budget now. So when we went back to our lender for the CapEx budget, they were no longer comfortable with the deal. So we had to find another lender. And with that, during that small time frame, the rates ticked up 3/4 of a point. So once we went back to repencil out the deal, we got another lender on board. Their LTV was slightly lower and their rates were slightly higher.
Yeah.
And the deal was a little bit thin to begin with. So we decided to walk from the deal because of that, because of the market shift, because of what our debt structure looked like and the amount of money we had to come out of pocket with at that point as well. So that's been the biggest thing nowadays is the sellers have not caught up with the lenders.
Yeah.
Right. Lenders are getting very strict with their LTVs, with their rates, with their terms in general. It's gotten a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing a little bit of, there's still a few brokers who are trying to say like, get your offer in right away. This one's going to go fast. And then when you go back to them and say, well, listen, I'm probably going to be significantly lower than they're asking. Do you want an offer? No. And then 3 weeks later, it's still sitting there. And 4 weeks later, it's still sitting there. So I think that exactly what you're saying, we're finding that the banks are changing what their requirements are a bit. And, as sellers start to learn that, I think price corrections are going to start to come.
Absolutely. I mean, I get updates constantly of price improvements, price reductions. But yeah, it's coming around, and some sellers really weren't motivated sellers. They were just saying, hey, if they're going to pay me this amount of money, I'll get rid of it. But if not, it's cash flowing, it's stabilized, it's in a good area, they'll hold it. The motivation's changed a little bit, right? So you drop a price by 15-20%, they're no longer motivated to sell.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. So I want to kind of do a little bit of a transition here. This is the Healthy Investor Podcast, and I want to talk about, I love to ask other investors and successful people about their habits and routines and sort of what does that look like for you, and how do you feel like that contributes to your success?
So I'm sure a lot of people have read Miracle Morning. A lot of you listeners read Miracle Morning. A lot of real estate investors have read Miracle Morning. So my mornings have always been what's gotten me to where I am. And, working for the union, you had to be in the city by 7 a.m. I was waking up at 4 a.m. I was going to the gym before work and then going on a train and getting to work and so on. Once I transitioned into another part of the city, I was driving to work, still going to the gym, still had that morning routine. Once I retired in 2019, I still go to the gym. I still go to the gym early. I don't have to go early, but I want to get it out of the way early. I feel like doing those hard things earlier in the morning makes the rest of your day easier. The release of the endorphins really helps. It gives me clarity. It helps me think. I got 2 little girls, so right when I come back from the gym, I'm dad. I'm making breakfast. I'm putting them on the bus. So my morning routine, without a doubt, is something that has really helped me stay disciplined and focused on what I'm trying to do here. Because very easily, once you stop having to punch a clock or report to somebody, you can become lackadaisical. It's so easy to fall into these comfortable habits. And don't get me wrong, there are days where I do hit the snooze button quite a few times. But for the most part, my discipline has maintained for me getting to the gym early in the morning and getting that hour and a half workout in.
Wow. So I have to give you credit because, first of all, in my early years, 20s, 30s, I was not getting up early. The idea of a morning routine or a morning anything, there were days in my 20s and 30s that breakfast wasn't even an option because it was like, woke up, yeah, rolled out of bed 5 minutes before I had to be out the door. So I give you credit for having that. And the idea that you've had it for so many years and now it's such a habit and a discipline that it's really a part of your life at this point.
It is, I'm getting up there in age. I'm in my mid 40s now. But I take good care of it, my body, and I feel it, and we were talking about earlier. Tomorrow is our 15th annual Turkey Bowl, and I'm going to be the one out there that's going to be out there earlier on, running around the field, and I won't be regretting it as much the next day. But yeah, I still play adult softball. I still play a little racquetball, basketball. I always enjoy being active. I was a jock in high school, and it's just something that it it resonated with me very early. Like breaking a sweat always felt good to me.
That's great. That's great. And I obviously it's working for you. Yeah, tomorrow Thanksgiving, and I'll tell you, our family this is going to be a first for us. The past few Thanksgivings, I've actually gone for a little run on my own, just because I like to get out and run whenever I can. But we're actually going to a turkey trot tomorrow morning. So
Very
my
cool.
wife Shannon, my daughter Julia, who's 11, and I are going to run a 5K local turkey trot 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So looking
I
forward to
love it.
that too.
I love it. That's so awesome.
We're going to go earn our turkey.
Yeah, it feels good, right? Like, yeah, you can get out there and pig out a little bit. But like, you know what? I burned how many calories this morning during that 5K. So, you know, and that's the other thing why I work out, because I enjoy eating. Like, I don't want to diet. I don't think I've ever really dieted. I recently ran a marathon, which we could talk about in a minute. But prior to that, I always ate whatever I wanted to, just because I knew the next day I was going to be going to the gym and burning it off. So I always earned two things. You earn a good meal, and you earn rest. Like,
Yeah.
I sleep very well when I have a good productive day of work and working out.
So let's jump into that. You mentioned that you just completed a marathon. Tell me a little bit about that. Where was the marathon? When was it? How did it go?
It was October 23rd. It was in Suffolk County, Long Island. It was my first one. Prior to that, I ran a half marathon in Virginia, which was in 2019. Um, and basically, what had happened was I was on another podcast, and they were talking about my goals for this year. And I spit it out that I wanted to run a marathon. And then people started following up. Hey, you running a marathon this year? And you want to train? You want to do this? And I was like, oh, I guess people are listening.
I guess
So,
people listened, right?
yeah. So it was accountability, right? So
Yeah.
I'm big on accountability as well. So, all right, people listening, I'm a man of my word. So I went out and said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I trained for about 4 months, which is just running for anywhere from, in the beginning, it was 3 to 5 miles and 5 to 12. And prior to the marathon, my longest distance run was 17 miles.
Hmm.
My scheduling got kind of screwed up with family and life, so I wasn't able to get the real long run in. But I felt good. I was the thinnest I've been. I had a lot of good miles under me. The one thing I was lacking was nutrition.
Yeah.
So during the run, my goal was a 4-hour pace. I was up to mile 17, where the body started cramping. Only the night before did I hear about salt taps. So I had none of them with me, and my body cramped. It started from my calf to my thigh to my rib area. And luckily enough, at mile 17 and a half, a guy gave me 2 salt tabs because he saw me literally punching my thighs to get him to not lock up anymore.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it was somewhat of agony to complete that run, but I did it. And I was proud and relieved, and I wasn't tired. I was in pain, right?
Sure.
So like I wasn't winded. My it was just the cramping was so intense, nothing I've ever felt before. So I learned about nutrition,
Hmm.
because I've had many conversations since that run with runners from all walks of life that said you really have to work on your nutrition. And yeah, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I haven't experienced salt tabs yet, but my furthest runs, I've done a few half marathons and a few 10-mile runs. So I think the longest run I ever did was one of the half marathons that I ran. By the time we were finished, and it was not an official event, it was just some friends and I, and
Mhm.
so by the time we got back to where our cars were, it was closer to 14 miles. So that was the longest I've ever run. Um, and we packed nutrition, but we weren't in that area where salt tabs were going to be necessary. And I've heard so much about after that 15, 17, 18 mile, and especially after mile 20, where you really need to make sure that you're getting the right electrolytes and salt and those kind of things, because you're obviously sweating them out and your
Yes.
body needs them. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. So I enjoy taking action. And then it was the night before that I heard a term called bump, which is where runners hit a wall at mile 20. And I was already, my bags were packed. I was running this marathon regardless of nutrition I had. So, but it was fun. My family was there to support me, my wife and kids. My mother made it out, so it was very gratifying. I'm proud that I finished it, and I'm glad that I set the bar so low that next time I go out and I can conquer that goal.
Well, congratulations. It's a huge accomplishment to finish a marathon. I think they say 0.01% of the world completes a marathon or something like
Yeah,
that.
right.
So there's
I just wonder because I have a close knit of friends and nobody in my network has ever run one, but I just wonder because as you like hang around like high achievers or people in the real estate business or people that are entrepreneurs, it feels like more and more of them are doing triathlons
yeah,
and 50Ks and ultra runs and marathons, and here I am like complaining about this marathon where we know guys
yeah.
that have just completed, ultra marathons and multiple ultra marathons. And,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
listen,
I had interviewed Matt Dunn earlier this year, and he was talking about he actually just completed and did a great job, a 45-mile run.
yep,
It was
yep.
amazing. He posted some updates as he was going. It was a lot of fun to kind of follow along and watch him. But yeah, you're right. So I do some sprint triathlons and Olympic district triathlons, and then through real estate and even through the podcast and all, I'm talking to more and more people who talk about marathon distance, ultra marathon distance, Ironman distance.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
It's awesome, but it's always great to have something on the calendar to train for, right? I'm always best version of myself when I have working on big deals or I have big goals ahead of me or, something to train for.
mm,
Um, when I don't have one of those big things, I kind of get testy. My wife sees me, I get down on myself sometimes. So it's really important for me to have something on my calendar to work towards.
well, that's great. I know that feeling and I am with you. And this is where, for me, winter becomes a little bit tougher because that's not necessarily what's happening, right? So, as a matter of fact, I was just looking at a triathlon that's in April, and I'm like, okay, if I put that on the calendar, does that then give me enough to keep pushing through the winter? Because there aren't as many events happening in the wintertime. So, and my daughter had expressed interest in wanting to do some running events over the winter. So now we're trying to we're going to do one Thanksgiving. We're going to do one around Christmas. We're going to try and do some things. And I think that'll help keep the spark going too.
I love it. I love that your daughter runs. Mine are a little bit younger than yours, but they've showed no interest in it so far. But hopefully they do in the near future, and we can get out there. One of them we do bike rides together, but no running just yet.
Yeah. She started cross country in third grade
Wow.
and she's now in sixth grade. And it's so great to see how the progress happens. I actually coach the team, and it's so interesting to see, these kids, they start out first year and they run a mile and a half. And some of them in third, second grade, it's, beginning of the season, it's taken them 19, 20 minutes to run a mile and a half. And even that first season, we'll see those kids by the end of the year running 16 and a half minutes, 17 minutes, right? They'll cut a few minutes off of their time. And then, progress, not perfection, right? Year two, we start to talk about, okay, now finish the race without walking, right? And then year
Hmm.
three is when we start talking about certain techniques and improving on certain skill sets. But, in the beginning for a lot of these kids, it's just seeing them get to the finish line and not give up. And it's really cool to see. It's a lot of fun for me. So I hope your kids decide to,
It's so
if
important.
it's not running, something that pushes them in that direction.
Yeah, they're in a few different sports right now, and it's interesting with having girls, and my wife kind of looks at me differently. Like I do push them,
Hmm.
because I realize how difficult it is out there, and the more resistance they see now in sport, the more prepared they'll be in life, because it's facing that resistance. I mean, it's very easy to sit at home and play on the iPad or just play with your friends in the neighborhood, but having that competition and that little bit of a competitive edge is going to help you in the long term.
Yeah, cool.
Definitely.
So I want to transition over to the final segment where we ask the same three questions of every guest. And this has been a lot of fun. For you, John, what is your definition of success?
For me, it's freedom. Being able to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. It's something that I've always thought about, and now I kind of am that person that can wander around and do what I want to do, and it feels incredible. Sometimes I kind of feel guilty, like I should probably be doing something else right now, but I realize that the 22 years working for the union, and even the years before that, I paid a lot of my dues, and I did the right thing, and put the money away and invested it to live this type of lifestyle now, where I can enjoy being around my kids, and have the freedom to go where I want and do what I want. So it's freedom 100% for me is the definition of success.
That's excellent. And I love that you're able to utilize that time to spend it with family, spend it, investing in a business that you really enjoy and again, doing the things that you want to do, which is really cool.
Absolutely.
So for someone who's new to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, can you give a good book recommendation?
Well, anyone starting off, if they haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, is the absolute best book, I think, to start off when you're young and trying to figure out life, money, and so on. But book that I've read recently that's really made an impact is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. And that's kind of changed the way I do my business now. Like I don't have to wear all the hats, and I shouldn't wear all the hats. And
Hmm.
I'm really not good at social media, so I could hire a VA, right? So that book has really made an impact, and that was recommended by one of our mutual mentors. And I think it's phenomenal. I think Dan Sullivan's phenomenal. He's got Gap in the Gain as well, which is another
Yes.
good book.
Yep.
So, but that's the one I just finished up, and I have a list now of how I'm going to do something and who's going to help me do it, and that's leading into 2023. What I'm most excited about.
Well, that's an excellent book recommendation. And as you mentioned, just moving into preparing for goals and, preparing for a new year, this is end of November, as I'd mentioned earlier, it's the day before Thanksgiving. And for me personally, I'm often spending this last month of the year trying to decide what's next year going to look like. I think all too often, in the past, I was the type of person that the new year would come and then somewhere around the second week of January, be like, okay, what are my goals for this year? What do I want to achieve this year? And I've changed that probably around 5 or 6 years ago. And so a good book. And, again, Who Not How is it's interesting for me. I asked that question, and this is now the 26th episode. And I'd love to check out a tally sheet, but that has by far been the most popular recommendation, Who Not How. And I just think in the way that the world is changing today, between having the ability to utilize virtual assistants, between having the ability to sort of, work from anywhere and communicate with anyone from anywhere, I think more and more people are starting to realize that you can find your who and they can be anywhere. And then part two of that is, which is my favorite takeaway from that book, isn't even finding the who, but it's more for me to reflect on where can I be someone else's who,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not just the part of it of finding all the who's are going to help me out, but where can I be the who? Because then what is my greatest value add? What is my greatest asset that I could provide to others? And where can I be your who? So it's very interesting to me. And I lit up when you said it, because I find that to be a great book. I have it on my shelf over here. And it's been a very popular recommendation. And I hope
Awesome.
that people are heeding that recommendation and listening and following up on
100%.
it, because it is a great book.
Yeah, 100%.
So before we move into the final question, first I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time and sharing of your story and all. This has been a lot of fun. I'm not sure that I knew that you participated in a marathon, so I'm glad we went down that road and I got to learn a little bit about that. So thank you. And how can we support you, and how can people reach out to you if they want to?
As far as reaching out, I'm getting more and more on social media. It's JT Geldert on Instagram, and then John Geldert on Facebook. And then I always pick up my cell phone, good, bad, or ugly. You could always give me a call, shoot me a text message, 516-359-0539. I had some people help me along the way. I always love answering questions for newer investors, people that are trying to figure out how to invest out of state, what to look for in a sponsor. So give me a shout, shoot me a text, and I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Great. So final question, if you could think back with me to a young John, around the ages of 10 to 12 years old, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to that young John, or really any pre-teenage child, to help guide them towards success?
It would be to get comfortable talking with other people, right? So for me, I grew up, I'm German. My father was very quiet, didn't speak with many people. And, gift the gab, I think, is really an art, right? Like, learn how to really be able to interact with adults, people that are in the position you want to be, and get comfortable networking. I was very uncomfortable when I first started going to my first networking events, and I've gotten more and more comfortable. But it's a muscle you build up. So, get comfortable making small talk, having conversations, not just hi and bye, but ask them, what's most exciting today? What's the best part of your weekend? Just trying to be able to communicate a little bit on a higher level.
Yeah, that's a great one. And, I have a daughter in that age range, which is probably what prompted me to begin asking these questions. And even being a coach, I'm around children that age. And I feel like for the most part, they do a pretty good job of communicating with each other, their peers. But oftentimes I can see that it's a struggle for them when they have to have a full-fledged conversation with an adult, especially an adult who maybe isn't in the inner circle, right? A teacher, a coach, someone else who's not necessarily, the closest part of the family. And, that's uncomfortable for us too, as adults, right? We were at Multifamily Mastery 5 a couple of weeks ago, and you walk into that room and there's 1,200 people. And I don't know about you, but the first step was like,
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's
yeah.
Getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Any others?
Oh, so I mean, 10 or 11 is a little bit difficult, but financial literacy, I think, is super important. I bought my daughter recently The Richest Kid in Babylon, and she didn't want to read it, but I said, if you read it and write a page, I'll give you, I think it was 50 cents per page that you write. So I incentivized her. But I think it's super important. I mean, they didn't teach it when I was a kid, and they still don't teach it in schools now. But financial literacy is super important. So I wish I would have had a little bit more of that in my life when I was younger. And then, you know, build what's called a life resume. Like, do interesting things. Like, your daughter's already running, which is phenomenal. Like, she'll be running half marathons by the time she's a teenager. The more things you do, the more interesting you are, the more opportunities you're going to have. Right. So Jesse Itza, he was on a podcast one time, and he talked about a life resume. And I was like, it blew my mind. Like, what does my life resume look like? What have I accomplished? What have I done? And since then I've done some really great, crazy stuff. And I'm going to continue to do that, because when I pass, I want to have, a highlight reel of all the things I've done with myself, as opposed to just, letting life go by. So go out and do interesting things, do hard things, and, build that life resume.
I love that term, life resume. I'm going to add that to our conversations at home. I really appreciate that. We often focus on the idea of experiences over things. And, the more we can do to try and create those experiences. But I love that idea of life resume. How can you continually improve your life resume? That's going to be something that we focus on here. So thank you for adding that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I can't think Jesse had to pass it on to me, so I'm glad I was able to pass it on to you.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming on today, John. I really appreciate it. If you got some value out of this, make sure you reach out to John. He's always been open to speaking with me and providing value for me, and I know he'll do the same for you. And thanks so much for listening to the Healthy Investor Podcast, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.